You have one life, don't settle for mediocrity.
Don't settle for mediocrity. And I think the only, people debate intelligence, for example, right? We talk about IQ tests and all that. But I think the only true test of intelligence is if you get what you want out of life. And there are two parts to that. One is getting what you want, so you know how to get it. And the second is wanting the right things, knowing what to want in the first place. I could want to be a 6'8" basketball player, and I'm not going to get that. So it's wanting the wrong thing. So
that's wanting something that you can't get.
That's wanting something you can't get.
There's also wanting something that you don't want.
Yeah, wanting something that's a booby prize. There are plenty of booby prizes out there too, right?
I haven't heard that word in about 20 years.
Yeah, prizes that are just not worth having or that create their own problems.
Well, if you're not careful, you can end up in a place in life not only that you don't want to be, but one that you didn't even mean to get to.
That's if you're kind of proceeding unconsciously.
But how many people
and usually I think people end up there because they are going on autopilot with sort of societal expectations or other people's expectations. So, or out of guilt or out of mimetic desire. Peter Thiel has this whole thing from René Girard about how mimetic desires are picked up from other people. And some of those are automatically baked into society, like, go to law school, go to med school, go to whatever, go to business school. Or they might be from watching what your friends are doing and, the other monkeys are doing. Or it might just be, what your parents' expectations are. It might be out of guilt. Guilt is just society's voice speaking in your head, socially programmed, so you'll be a good little monkey and do things that are good for the tribe. But I think the best outcomes come when you think it through for yourself and decide for yourself. And I don't think people spend enough time deciding. For example, we run on these 4-year cycles. In Silicon Valley, you go join a startup, you vest your stock over 4 years. That's the standard.
Okay.
In college, you go for 4 years. High school, you go for 4 years. Some things take longer. You have children, they hit puberty 9 years later. That's like a 9-year cycle until that relationship changes. But we're used to these fairly long cycles, multi-year cycles in which we are committed to things. You go to law school, 4 or 5 year cycle. You go be a lawyer, 40-year cycle. These are very long cycles. The amount of time we spend deciding what to do and who to do it with, very short, very, very short, right? We spend, 3 months deciding, 1 month deciding on a job where we're going to be for 10 years or 5 years. And because a lot of discovery is path dependent, where the next thing you find on the path is dependent on where you were on the previous path, you sort of start going down this vector that is a very long distance. People decide frivolously which city to live in, and that's going to decide who their friends are, what their jobs are, their opportunity, their weather, their food supply, their air supply, quality of life. It's such an important decision, but people spend so little time thinking it through. I would argue that if you're making a 4-year decision, spend a year thinking it through, like really thinking it through.
25% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. There's the secretary theorem. I don't know if you know that one.
Is that after you've done this many people, pick
Correct.
The best one of the next however many?
That's right. Yeah, the secretary theorem is this computer science professor is trying to figure out how much time he should spend interviewing secretaries and then how long to keep the secretary. So let's say he's going to have a secretary for 10 years. Does he keep searching for, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 1 month, 2 months? What is the optimal time? And it turns out that the optimal time is somewhere around a third. About a third of the way through, you take the best person you've worked with and try to find someone that good or better. So by the time you've gone about a third of the way through, you have seen enough that you now have a sense of what the bar is. And then anybody who meets or exceeds that bar is good enough. And this applies to dating, this applies to jobs and careers, this applies generally. But the interesting thing about the secretary theorem is that it's actually not time-based. It's not based on 1/3 of the time. It's iteration-based.
The number of candidates.
The number of shots you took on goal.
Yeah.
That's right. So you want to have lots and lots of iterations. So in that sense,
you need to bail out quickly and you need to be decisive quickly.
That's right.
You need to take opportunities quickly and bail out quickly.
Correct. Like if you go back and you look through failed relationships, probably the biggest regret will be staying in the relationship after you knew it was over.
Yeah.
Exactly. You should have left sooner. The moment you knew it wasn't going to work out, you should have moved on. So in that sense, I think Malcolm Gladwell popularized this idea of 10,000 hours to mastery. I would say it's actually 10,000 iterations to mastery. It's not actually 10,000. It's some unknown number, but it's about the number of iterations that drives a learning curve. And iteration is not repetition. Repetition is a different thing. Repeating is doing the same thing over and over. Iteration is modifying it with a learning and then doing another version of it. So that's error correction. So if you get 10,000 error corrections in anything, you will be an expert at it.
Don't partner with cynics and pessimists. you mentioned there about the people who've got a nightmare going on at home and are trying to fix the world. But a lot of the time that cynicism and pessimism we find in ourselves. We see the world, whether we want to, whether it's because we've imbibed what the news or the negative people around us have said, or it's a bit more kind of endogenous than that. It's just sort of in us. It's the way that we see the world. How can people avoid cynicism and pessimism within themselves?
Yeah, cynicism and pessimism is a tough one. We're naturally hardwired for it. Again, I go back to evolution. I'm sorry to keep harping on evolution, but within biology, there's very few good explanatory theories, and theory of evolution by natural selection is probably the best one. So if you can't explain something about life or psychology or human nature through evolution, then you probably don't have a good theory for it. And I would say that pessimism is another one that comes out of this, which is in the natural environment, you're hardwired to be pessimistic, because let's say that I see something rustling in the woods, and if I move towards it and it turns out to be food and prey, then good, I get to eat one meal. But if it turns out to be a predator, I get eaten, and that's the end of that. So we are hardwired to avoid ruin, and just dying. So we are naturally hardwired to be pessimists. But modern society is very different. Despite whatever problems you may have with modern society, it is far, far safer than living in the jungle and just trying to survive. And the opportunities and the upside are nonlinear. For example, when you're investing, if you short a stock, the most money you can make is 2x. You just lose. If the stock goes to zero, you double your money. But if the stock is the next NVIDIA and it goes 100x or 1000x, you make a lot of money. So upside because of leverage is nearly unlimited. Also in modern society, because there's so many different people you can interact with, if you go on a date and it fails, there are infinite more people to go on a date with. In a tribal system, there might have been 20 people and you can't even get through all of them. So modern society is far more forgiving of failure. And you just have to sort of neocortically realize and override that. You have to realize that you're much more running a search function to find the thing that'll work. And then that one thing will pay off in massive compounding. Once you find your mate for the rest of your life, you find your wife or your husband, then you can compound in that relationship. It's okay if you had 50 failed dates in between. The same way, once you find the one business you're meant to plow into and it'll compound returns, it's okay if you had 50 small failed ventures or 50 small failed job interviews. The number of failures doesn't matter. And so there's no point in being a pessimist. You want to be an optimist, but I would say you want to be skeptical about specific things. Every specific opportunity is probably a fail, but you want to be optimistic in the general. In the general, you want to be like, something in here is going to work out.
How do you navigate that tension?
I mean, exactly as I said, I'm optimistic in the general that if something fails right now, then this is a little woo-woo, but it wasn't meant to be. It was a learning experience. It was an iteration. As long as I learned something from it, then it's a win. If I didn't learn from it, then it's a loss. But as long as you're learning and you keep iterating fast and cutting your losses quickly, then when you find the right thing, you have to be optimistic and compound into it. So you don't want to jump into the first thing. You don't want to marry the first person you date necessarily, unless you got very lucky. But you want to investigate and explore very, very quickly until you find the match. And then you have to be willing to go all in. You have to be willing to move your chips to the center of the table. So both those approaches are required.
So it's a barbell strategy. It's sort of black or it's white, and most people are sort of stuck in this gray bit. I'm like half in, but I'm kind of don't really know if I am. And
I also think like labels like pessimist, optimist, cynic, introvert, extrovert, these are very self-limiting. Humans are very dynamic. There are times when you feel like being introverted. There are times when you feel like being extroverted. There are contexts in which you'll be pessimistic. There are contexts in which you'll be optimistic. Leave all those labels alone. It's better just to look at the problem at hand, look at reality the way it is. Try to take yourself out of the equation in a sense. Like, obviously, you're involved, but motivated reasoning is the worst kind of reasoning. You're not going to find truth through highly motivated reasoning. You have to be objective, and objective means trying to take yourself out of it as much as possible, or at least your personality out of it as much as possible. And so to the extent you run with this thick identity and personality, it's going to cloud your judgment. It's going to try and lock you into the past. If you say, I'm a depressed and unhappy person, yeah, I'm going to be unhappy, that's a way of locking yourself into your past. Even saying, I have trauma, I have PTSD, yeah, you feel something. There are memories, there are flashes, there are occasional bad feelings. but don't define yourself by it, because then you'll lock it into your identity and you're just going to loop on it. It's better to stay flexible because reality is always changing and you have to be able to adapt to it. Adaptation is also intelligence. Adaptation is survival. Adaptation is kind of how you're here. You're here because you're an adapter and your ancestors were adapters. So to adapt, you'll be able to see things clearly. And if you're seeing them through your own identity, it's going to cloud your judgment.